Hey kiddos, Miss Carol here. I miss you guys, but I hope you're having a great spring break. We're going to go ahead and talk about elapsed time and what that means. So we're actually learning how to use and measure time intervals. And why do we need to do that? Well, we need to do that in order to plan our day and our activity and how long we're going to be somewhere. And it also helps us when we are trying to make sure we get somewhere on time. So let's talk about what elapsed time actually means. Well, the definition of elapsed time is the amount of time that passes from the start of an activity until it ends. So I think I gave you guys the example of soccer practice, maybe right before we got out when we were starting to talk about this. If I go to soccer practice at 3:30 and it's over at 5, I can count up the time from my start time to my end time to know how much time has actually passed, how long I was at soccer practice. Okay, so let's talk about some strategies to do this. And that will be this chart right here. Okay, so the T-chart. So with a T-chart, you're going to draw your regular T-chart and you're going to go ahead and label it. One side time, one side hours and minutes. So this particular problem says that something is going to start at 8:35 and it's going to end at 9:45. Say it's a museum exhibit, okay? So what I would do is I would list my start time, and then I would use my brain, I would use those wonderful brains of yours to figure out the context of this and kind of see what makes sense as to how much time I want to count at one time. So it does pass the next hour, so that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to go ahead and write 9:35, which is 1 hour later, and I still haven't passed my end time, so we're fine. But to get to my end time, I need to add 10 more minutes. So I would add 10 over here and write the new time. Each time I add, each time I go forward, I need to write it down so I can keep up with it so I don't get confused later. So once I'm done with that, over here I've got an hour and 10 minutes that I can add up to know what my elapsed time is. I suggest using this strategy if the times are not too far apart, but maybe they're not on the o'clock or the 30-minute mark. So when it's a little bit harder to just count up, because sometimes you can do that. If it's from 1:30 to 2:30, well, you can obviously count up just an hour, and you guys know that. You're smart like that. All right, another strategy that we would use is the number line. Okay, so I would use this strategy when you have some kind of strange number, some off-the-wall number that you've got to incorporate in your adding up, okay? So I would first label my number line with my start time, okay? This is also a pretty large amount of time that's going to pass. So a number line works for that too. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to count up the hours that I can pass. So if I'm going from 3:18 to 7:30, my minutes are actually a little bit later, so I can count that hour. So I'm going to count from 3:18, I'm going to count 4:18, 5:18, 6:18, and 7:18. So that equals 4 hours. So I'm actually going to make a mountain on my number line for those 4 hours. That gets me to 7:18, so I'm not done yet. I'm going to go ahead and make a little rock or a pebble jump for 2 minutes. That way I can get to the next 10. It's a lot easier to count by tens than it is individual numbers, like counting by ones. So I'm going to go ahead and make that 2-minute jump. And every time I make a jump, don't forget to label every time you make a jump. So I'm going to go to, that gets me to 7:20. And then I can just add 10 more minutes to get to 7:30. So then I add all of that up, and my total elapsed time here is 4 hours and 12 minutes. Got it? Okay. Another strategy you can use is the zoom strategy. Now this is kind of new. I've only done this a time or two, but it's actually pretty neat. I would use this strategy when you have a good amount of time that passes, but it's also on one of those intervals like 30, 15, 45, something like that. It makes it a lot easier to use the strategy. So what we would do is we would run our start time first. So our start time here is 8:45. Then I'm going to make this big Z. Okay? All right. So I need to get to the next hour first. So the next hour in order would be 9 o'clock. So to get to 9 o'clock, it takes 15 minutes. So I go ahead and label 15, put my arrow there, and label this side 9 o'clock. So now I can count my hours. I can count the biggest chunk of my time. So then right here in the middle is where I'm going to do that. I'm going to label. So I can actually go 3 more hours, starting at 9 o'clock. So 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. So I'm going to label the big part of my Z 3 hours. And that gets me to 12 o'clock right here. Okay? But then I have a few more minutes to go. I've got to get 30 more minutes in. So that last line of my Z, I'm going to label 30 minutes to get to my end time of 12:30. Then I just add all this up in the middle. So 15 minutes, 3 hours, and 30 minutes. When I add it up, I get 3 hours and 45 minutes for my elapsed time. Okay? I like that strategy. It's kind of new. I like it. Okay. The last strategy, I have to be honest, I wouldn't really use this if I'm going to have to draw the clock out. I would use this strategy if there's a clock already there drawn for me. But that's just me. If you want to use that strategy, you go right ahead. You use all the tools in your toolkit. So, but I will say, when you are drawing your clock, remember, Miss Carol always says to make sure that everything is lined up and even. So it's very important when we are counting something or we're comparing something that it's the same throughout. So I showed you this too. My suggestion is to start at the 12 and then go ahead and write your 6, okay? Then go horizontal. Get your 3 and your 9 in, and then you can fill in the gaps and everything is a whole lot more even and looks a whole lot better. And you won't get confused if you do it that way. So if you're going to do this, go ahead and use your hour and minute hand to label your start time. Start time. So start time is 4:30. My hour hand is between the 4 and the 5. My minute hand is on the 6. Remember, counting by 5s, multiplying by 5s to get to 30. 6 times 5 is 30. So I label it there. Okay. Then what I would do is I would get a different color, either marker, crayon, or maybe shading a little darker with my pencil, whatever you can do to help you kind of see the difference in the hour and the minute as you go. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to start on your minute hand for start time, okay? You're going to go 1 time around for every hour. This time, we can only go 1 hour, okay? So that gets us to 5:30. We can't go to 6:30. That's past our end time. That's too far. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to now go inside our analog clock. And if you can get a different color, that'd be great. So you're going to start at the 6, which is where, remember, your hour circle ended. Then you're going to go to the inside of the clock to count your minutes in a different color if you can. Counting by 5s until you get to 5 minutes after. So which is at the 1. 1 times 5 is 5. All right, so that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. Remember, jot down every time you count something. So then I add up that 1 hour plus the 35 minutes for an hour and 35 minutes of elapsed time. Okay? If you have any questions, send me a message through Google Classroom or your parents through Remind. I do have a challenge for you. I want you to figure out the elapsed time for this right here using any of these strategies that you want to, and then I want you to email me on Google Classroom your answer, okay? want you to figure out the elapsed time. If your start time is 10:45 a.m., your end time is 3:30 p.m. Remember, use any of these strategies that you want to, and send me a message on Google Classroom with your answer. Okay, bye guys.